Welcome to Healthy Kidneys After 60, our cozy corner where we share deep conversations about health, aging, and finding the joy in our later years. I am Jane Pauley, and today we are sitting down in a very quiet, warm space to talk about something that many of you feel every single day, but perhaps rarely voice. That nagging coldness in your hands, the tingling in your feet, and that subtle fear that our bodies are slowly becoming strangers to us. Joining me today is a man who has spent over 5 decades listening to the stories of thousands of patients, a renowned neurosurgeon and public health expert who looks at medicine through the lens of compassion, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Dr. Gupta, it is such an honor to have you here by the fireplace with us today to talk about these intimate health concerns.
Thank you so much for having me, Jane. It is truly a pleasure to be here in such a peaceful setting. You know, after 50 years in the medical field, I have realized that the most important conversations don't happen in a sterile operating room, but in quiet moments like this one, where we can truly listen to what our bodies are trying to tell us. I have seen so many patients who feel like they are just fading away, but I am here today because I want everyone listening to know that your golden years should be spent in comfort and independence, not in shadows and pain. I am looking forward to diving deep into these stories with you and your audience.
Dr. Gupta, I want to start with a feeling that I know many of our listeners are experiencing right now as they listen to us, perhaps while sitting in their favorite armchair with a blanket over their knees. It is that persistent biting cold in the fingers and toes, or that strange heavy numbness that makes you feel like you are walking on cotton wool. For so many of my friends and colleagues, we tend to just sigh and say, well, I suppose this is just what happens when you turn 70. It is just the natural slowing down of the clock. But I often wonder if we are being too dismissive of ourselves. Is it truly just a harmless byproduct of the passing years? Or is there a deeper, perhaps more urgent message that our internal systems are trying to broadcast to us through these quiet symptoms? I see so many people around me losing that spark of independence because they are afraid to walk too far, or because their hands are too stiff to enjoy their hobbies, and it breaks my heart to think we might be ignoring a cry for help.
Jane, you have touched on something so fundamental yet so overlooked in modern geriatric care. When we feel that chill in our extremities or that loss of sensation, it isn't just a sign that we need a thicker pair of socks. It is actually a profound physiological signal. Imagine for a moment that your body is a grand, historic home that has stood beautifully for 60, 70, or 80 years. Inside the walls of this home is a complex network of plumbing, the pipes that carry life-sustaining water to every corner. In medical terms, we call this the vascular system, specifically the endothelium, which is the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels. As the house ages, those pipes can become narrow, brittle, or clogged with debris, a condition we refer to as endothelial dysfunction. When this happens, the furthest rooms in the house, your hands and feet, are the first to lose pressure and warmth. But the danger isn't just a cold room. It is that if the water isn't reaching the edges, it means the entire system is struggling. That coldness is the body's way of whispering that the circulation is failing to deliver oxygen and vital nutrients where they are needed most. It is not just about the discomfort in your toes. It is a warning that the same process could be happening in the vessels that feed your heart and your brain. When the circulation slows down, it's like a slow-motion dehydration of your tissues. This is why we see a direct correlation between poor peripheral circulation and things like fading memory or a sudden lack of stamina. We shouldn't look at it as an inevitable part of aging, but rather as a mechanical issue that requires our attention before the damage becomes irreversible.
That image of the old house really resonates with me, Dr. Gupta, because I think many of us feel like we are trying to maintain a structure that is slowly wearing out. But it's frightening to think that a cold hand could be a precursor to losing one's memory or having a heart that can't keep up. I think many seniors feel a sense of guilt or even shame, thinking they didn't take care of themselves well enough when they were younger, so now they just have to endure it. They stop mentioning it to their doctors because they don't want to be seen as complainers. But if we are talking about a systemic failure of this internal plumbing, what is actually happening at a microscopic level that causes such a dramatic shift in our quality of life? Is it really just a matter of things getting old, or are there specific hidden triggers that are accelerating this breakdown in our 60s and 70s?
It is a combination of both, Jane, but the good news is that we have more control over it than people think. The shame you mentioned is something I see often, and I want to tell everyone listening, this is not your fault. It is biology, but biology can be influenced. When the endothelium stops functioning correctly, it fails to produce a vital molecule called nitric oxide. Think of nitric oxide as the signal that tells the pipes to open up and let the blood flow through. Without it, the vessels stay constricted and stiff, like a garden hose that has been left out in the sun and turned hard and unyielding. When your vessels are stiff, your heart has to pump much harder to push blood through, which leads to fatigue and that heavy feeling in the legs. Furthermore, when the blood flow is restricted, the tiny nerves in your extremities begin to starve. They are like little plants that aren't being watered, and as they start to wither, they send back error signals to the brain, which we feel as tingling, burning, or numbness. This isn't just aging, it's a state of chronic oxygen deprivation. If we ignore these minor signs, we are essentially allowing the foundation of our health to erode. I have seen patients who waited until they could no longer feel the floor beneath their feet before seeking help. And at that point, the path back to independence is much steeper. We have to change the narrative from accepting the decline to protecting the flow. If we can restore the health of that inner lining, we can often see a remarkable return of warmth, sensation, and most importantly, that sense of being present and active in one's own life again.
Dr. Gupta, it is heart-wrenching to listen to the many seniors who call into our station, sounding so defeated as they describe how their world is shrinking because of physical pain and constant discomfort. They often speak about how they've stopped taking those evening walks with their spouses or playing with their grandchildren on the floor because their legs feel like lead or their feet are prickling with thousands of tiny needles. There seems to be this unspoken, heavy cloud of resignation, a belief that once you cross a certain age threshold, you are simply required to sign a contract with pain and carry it as a permanent companion. I wonder, in your decades of practice, when you look into the eyes of someone who has lost that sparkle of life because they are physically suffering, how do you begin to dismantle that myth that aging must be synonymous with misery, and what is really happening when someone feels their body is slowly betraying them?
Jane, that resignation you describe is perhaps the greatest tragedy I encounter in my clinic because it is built on a misunderstanding of what our bodies are capable of, even in our later years. I remember very clearly a gentleman named Robert Miller, a 68-year-old retired school teacher living in Ohio, who came to see me with that exact look of defeat in his eyes. Robert told me he had always been an active man, but recently his feet had become so cold and numb that he felt like he was walking on blocks of ice, and even a short stroll to his mailbox left his calves aching and exhausted. He sat there in his chair, rubbing his knees, and told me he thought this was just his new normal, and that he was just waiting for the day he would need a wheelchair. I had to sit close to him and explain that his body wasn't just giving up due to age. It was suffering from a very specific mechanical failure where his smallest capillaries were being starved of blood flow. When those tiny vessels stop delivering oxygen, the tissues begin to scream in the only way they know how, which is through pain and fatigue. It is a slow, silent erosion of quality of life, but it is not an inevitable sentence. Robert's story is so common because we are taught to ignore the early whispers of our vascular system until they become shouts of agony.
It is so moving to hear about Robert because his fear is the fear of so many people who feel they are losing their independence bit by bit, and it makes me think about how we often focus on big diseases like cancer or major heart attacks, but we ignore these smaller issues like cold feet or heavy legs. Why is it that these symptoms, which seem so minor at first, are actually the most dangerous indicators of our future health? And what does it do to a person's spirit when they realize their own circulation is the very thing holding them back from the people they love?
You hit the nail on the head, Jane, because the spirit often breaks long before the body does when a person feels trapped within their own skin. In Robert's case, he had stopped going to his grandson's baseball games in Ohio because he was embarrassed by how slowly he moved and terrified that he might trip because he couldn't feel the ground. This isolation feeds a cycle of depression and further physical decline because when you stop moving, your circulation only gets worse. I explained to him that these tiny capillaries are like the furthest branches of a tree. If the tips of the branches are turning brown and brittle, the whole tree is in trouble, even if the trunk looks sturdy. We often ignore the toes and fingers because they are far from the heart, but they are our early warning system. When Robert finally understood that his pain was a signal of oxygen hunger and not just a broken body, I saw a flicker of hope return to his face. We have to realize that our bodies are incredibly resilient, but they require the right fuel and the right plumbing maintenance to keep the lights on in those faraway rooms of our limbs. If we can address the circulation, we aren't just treating a symptom. We are handing a person back the keys to their life and their independence.
Dr. Gupta, I want to talk about the frustration that so many health-conscious seniors feel when they do everything by the book, yet still find themselves facing stiff arteries and poor circulation. They eat their leafy greens, they avoid the sweets, and they follow every piece of advice they see on the news. But then they go to the doctor and hear that their blood vessels are becoming rigid, almost like old plastic pipes. It feels like a betrayal of sorts, a sense of, I did everything right, so why is my body still failing me? What is this hidden piece of the puzzle that we are missing in our modern diet? And how can someone who thinks they are eating a perfect, healthy breakfast actually be missing the very nutrients that keep their blood flowing smoothly?
It is a profound irony of modern nutrition, Jane, that you can be well-fed but nutrient-starved in ways that specifically target your cardiovascular health. Many people don't realize that even the healthiest diet can be missing a crucial traffic cop for our minerals. And I am talking specifically about vitamin K2, particularly the MK7 form. We have been told for decades to take calcium for our bones, but without K2, that calcium is like a traveler without a map. It doesn't know where to go. Instead of landing in your bones where it belongs, it ends up settling in the walls of your arteries, making them stiff and inelastic, a process we call calcification. This is why some people who eat very clean still have vessels that feel like hard plastic rather than soft, flexible silk. It's a terrifying thought that the very supplements or foods we use to get stronger could be contributing to the hardening of our internal pathways because we lack that one specific coordinator.
That is a startling revelation, Dr. Gupta, to think that we might be accidentally petrifying our own arteries while trying to save our bones. It makes me wonder about the invisible choices we make every day at the grocery store and how a lack of understanding about these specific vitamins can lead to such a massive breakdown in our health. If vitamin K2 is the traffic cop, why isn't it a household name yet? And how does this deficiency manifest in the daily lives of people who are trying so hard to stay healthy but feel themselves getting stiffer and more tired every year?
The reason it isn't a household name yet is that our focus has been so narrow, looking only at the big vitamins while ignoring the complex symphony of how they work together. Think of your circulatory system as a highway. If you have plenty of cars but the traffic lights are broken, you're going to have a massive pileup. When K2 is missing, the calcium builds up like rust inside a pipe, narrowing the passage for blood and forcing the heart to work under immense pressure. This is why people feel that phantom fatigue. Their blood is trying to move through a rigid, narrow tunnel instead of a wide open road. I have seen many individuals who were shocked to learn that their healthy, low-fat diet was actually depriving them of the fat-soluble vitamins like K2 and D3 that are essential for keeping arteries soft. We need to stop thinking about vitamins in isolation and start understanding that for our blood to reach our brains and our toes, we need these specific navigators to keep the calcium out of our hearts and in our skeletons. It's a simple shift in understanding, but it can be the difference between a life of vitality and a life of slow, rigid decline.
Dr. Gupta, it seems so unfair that one small, seemingly innocent habit could have such a devastating ripple effect across our entire circulatory system. We often think of health as a series of big events, but you often talk about how the tiny, everyday choices are the ones that either build us up or tear us down. I hear from many people who are terrified of fat because of the messages we've been fed for years, and they've switched to what they think are healthier alternatives, only to find their health declining even faster. Could you help us understand how these common, everyday dietary mistakes, things people do with the best of intentions, are actually acting like a slow-acting poison for our blood vessels and our overall longevity?
Jane, you're touching on a very sensitive and important topic because the misinformation of the past has created a modern health crisis for the elderly. I am reminded of Margaret Johnson, a 74-year-old woman from Florida who I met a few years ago. Margaret was the picture of discipline. She had completely cut out all butter and animal fats, replacing them with industrial vegetable oils and margarine because she thought she was protecting her heart. However, when she came to me, she was suffering from constant dizziness. Her memory was beginning to slip away like sand through her fingers, and she had a dull, aching pain in her chest that never seemed to leave. I had to explain to her that by choosing these highly processed inflammatory oils, she was actually causing micro scars on the inside of her blood vessels. These oils are unstable and create oxidative stress, which is like sending a sandpaper-like fluid through her delicate circulatory system every single day. The body tries to patch these scars with cholesterol and calcium, which eventually leads to the very blockages she was trying to avoid.
It is heartbreaking to hear about Margaret, especially when she was trying so hard to do the right thing for her family and her future. It makes me realize that so many of us are operating on outdated information that is literally hardening our hearts. How did Margaret react when she realized her healthy choices were the cause of her suffering? And what does her story teach us about the hidden dangers of the modern food landscape that specifically targets the aging body?
Margaret was devastated at first, Jane. She actually cried in my office because she felt she had wasted years following bad advice. But that sadness eventually turned into a powerful motivation to change. We talked about how the aging body becomes much more sensitive to inflammation and how those industrial fats act as a trigger for a systemic fire that consumes our energy and clarity. I taught her that our brains are mostly fat, and our hormones require healthy fats to function, so by starving her body of the right lipids, she was essentially dimming the lights on her own cognitive function. This is the hidden price of the low-fat craze. We traded healthy, stable fats for inflammatory, processed ones, and our blood vessels paid the price in stiffness and plaque. Margaret's journey back to health involved a complete relearning of what good food looks like, moving away from the factory-made bottles and back to the simple whole foods that her grandmother would have recognized. It's a powerful lesson that sometimes the smallest change in our pantry can be the most significant medical intervention we ever make for our circulation and our sanity.
Dr. Gupta, after hearing about the damage we can accidentally cause, I think we all need a bit of hope. The idea that our blood vessels can actually be softened or rejuvenated after years of stiffness sounds almost like a miracle to someone who has lived with pain or fatigue for a long time. We often hear about vitamin D3 as the sunshine vitamin, but you describe it as something much more powerful when it's paired with K2, almost like a restoration crew for our internal highways. How do these two nutrients work together to actually reverse some of that rigidity? And is it truly possible for someone in their 70s or 80s to feel a physical unclogging of their vitality?
It is absolutely possible, Jane, and it's one of the most rewarding things I see in my work. Think of vitamin D3 and K2 as the dynamic duo of vascular health. While K2 acts as the traffic cop directing calcium, vitamin D3 is the master regulator that helps your body produce nitric oxide, that miraculous gas that tells your blood vessels to relax and expand. When you have enough D3, your vessels can breathe again. They regain their elasticity, allowing blood to flow into those tight, cramped spaces that have been starved for years. This isn't just theory. It's a biological restoration. I've seen patients who, after correcting these deficiencies, describe a sensation of warmth returning to their limbs as if a frozen river had finally begun to melt. It is a slow, steady process of turning plastic pipes back into flexible living tissue.
That image of a frozen river melting is so beautiful and gives so much hope to those who feel stuck in a cold, stiff body. It makes me wonder about the synergy between these elements and why nature intended them to work as a pair. Why is it that taking one without the other can sometimes be less effective or even problematic? And how does this softening of the vessels change the way a person experiences their daily life, from the way they breathe to the way they think?
That synergy is vital, Jane, because if you take vitamin D3 alone, it increases your absorption of calcium, but without K2 to guide that calcium, you might just be adding more rust to your pipes. When they work together, it's like a perfectly choreographed dance that cleanses and relaxes the system simultaneously. I see this profound change in people's cognitive clarity. When the vessels in the neck and brain soften, the brain fog that many seniors accept as normal begins to lift. They find they can follow a conversation more easily, or they remember where they left their keys because their brain is finally getting a full, rich supply of oxygenated blood. It's like turning up the pressure in a garden hose that was previously kinked. Suddenly, every part of the garden starts to bloom again. For someone in their golden years, this isn't just about avoiding a heart attack. It's about feeling alive in every sense of the word, with a body that supports their dreams instead of hindering them.
Dr. Gupta, there is a specific kind of suffering that I hear about which sounds particularly terrifying, a burning, stinging sensation in the feet, almost like walking on hot coals, or a deep, agonizing itch that can't be scratched. This neuropathy seems to steal the sleep and the sanity of so many people as they age. They feel like their nerves are misfiring, sending signals of pain for no reason at all. It's a very lonely kind of pain because it's invisible to everyone else. Can you explain why our nerves start to scream like this? And is there a way to actually repair the wiring of our bodies once it has started to fray and burn?
That burning is a very specific cry for help from the peripheral nervous system. And it is something I saw vividly in a patient named William Harris, an 82-year-old gentleman from California. William was a proud veteran, but he was being brought to tears by what he described as electrical shocks in his toes every night. He couldn't even stand the weight of a bedsheet on his feet. I explained to William that his nerves were like electrical wires that had lost their protective insulation. When the blood flow is poor, the tiny vessels that feed the nerves, the vasa nervorum, wither away. The nerves then become hyperexcitable, firing off pain signals because they are literally starving and suffocating. It's a devastating condition because it attacks the very foundation of your mobility and your rest.
Hearing about William's struggle with something as simple as a bedsheet is just heart-wrenching, and it highlights how these neurological issues can turn a person's home into a place of torment. It makes me think about the connection between the pipes we talked about and these wires. If the circulation is the root cause, does fixing the blood flow automatically fix the nerves, or do we need a specific kind of medicine to help rebuild that insulation that has been lost over the years?
It's a two-part repair job, Jane. You have to fix the plumbing to stop the damage, but you also have to provide the raw materials to fix the wiring. This is where something called alpha-lipoic acid, or ALA, becomes a game changer. ALA is a powerful antioxidant that can actually cross into the nerve tissue and help neutralize the fire of oxidative stress that is eating away at the nerve endings. For William, we focused on improving his circulation while using ALA to help re-insulate those frayed wires. I told him it was like replanting a garden that had been scorched by a drought. First you bring the water back, and then you add the nutrients to help the grass grow again. Slowly, the burning started to fade into a dull hum, and eventually he was able to sleep through the night without pain. It's a reminder that our nervous system has a remarkable ability to heal if we stop the constant assault of poor circulation and provide it with the specific antioxidants it needs to rebuild. William eventually went back to walking his dog in the California sunshine, a simple joy that he thought was gone forever.
Dr. Gupta, we've talked a lot about what to add to our lives, but I think it's equally important to talk about the hidden traps in our kitchens. There are so many foods that we have been told are healthy or heart-friendly that might actually be working against us, especially as our metabolism changes after 60. It can be so confusing for someone trying their best to navigate the grocery aisles. Could you shed some light on the foods that might seem innocent or even beneficial, but are actually contributing to that stiffness and inflammation we are trying so hard to avoid?
This is where it gets very interesting, Jane, because some of our most common dietary habits are based on half-truths. For instance, many people think that eating a lot of processed whole grain crackers or breads is great for their heart, but these products are often loaded with hidden sugars and inflammatory oils that spike your insulin and damage the endothelium. But on the flip side, there are miracle foods that people ignore. I often talk to my patients about the power of nitrates, not the synthetic ones in deli meats, but the natural ones found in things like beets and spinach. These are the raw materials your body uses to create nitric oxide. I've even surprised some people by telling them that high-quality dark chocolate in moderation can be a potent vasodilator because of its flavonoids. The key is moving away from anything that comes in a box with a long list of unpronounceable ingredients and moving toward living foods that naturally support the expansion of your blood vessels.
It's fascinating to think that something as simple as a beet or a piece of dark chocolate could be more powerful than some of the processed health foods we see advertised. It really comes back to that idea of giving the body the basic tools it needs to function. Why is it that we've moved so far away from these simple truths, and how can a senior listener start to reorganize their plate today to ensure they are actually feeding their circulation rather than just filling their stomach?
We moved away because of convenience and clever marketing, Jane, but our bodies haven't changed. Our ancestors didn't have endothelial dysfunction at nearly the rates we see today because their diets were naturally rich in these vasodilating compounds. For a senior listener, the change can start with one meal. Replace that processed cereal with a bowl of greens or a smoothie with some beet powder. Understand that every bite is a chemical message to your arteries. Either relax and open or inflame and constrict. When you choose foods rich in natural nitrates and healthy fats, you are literally giving your circulatory system a breath of fresh air. It's about being an advocate for your own internal flow. I always tell my patients, don't just eat to be full, eat to be fluid. When your blood moves well, everything from your brain to your toes feels the benefit, and that is the ultimate goal of nutrition after 60.
Dr. Gupta, as we move through our day, it's not just about what we put in our mouths, but how we move and treat our bodies in the quiet moments. I've heard you speak about very simple, almost effortless habits that can make a profound difference in our circulation, things that don't require a gym membership or expensive equipment. For someone who might be feeling frail or worried about falling, the idea of exercise can be intimidating. What are these small, gentle movement secrets that can help pump the blood back up to the heart and keep our systems from becoming stagnant?
You're so right, Jane. The word exercise can be a barrier for many. I remember Eleanor Smith, a remarkable 90-year-old woman from New York who was terrified of losing her ability to live alone in her apartment. Eleanor wasn't going to go for a run, but I taught her the 15-minute elevation rule. Every afternoon, she would lie down and elevate her legs above the level of her heart while practicing slow, deep, diaphragmatic breathing. This simple act uses gravity to help the old blood return from the legs, relieving the pressure on her veins and allowing fresh, oxygenated blood to circulate more easily when she stood back up. I also encouraged her to do ankle pumps while she sat and watched the news, just simple flexing of the feet. These small muscle contractions act as a second heart, pushing blood through the veins and preventing the swelling and heaviness that often leads to falls.
Eleanor sounds like such an inspiration, and it's wonderful to think that such a simple habit could help a 90-year-old maintain her independence in a city as busy as New York. It makes me wonder why we don't emphasize these gentle techniques more often. How does something as simple as breathing or moving one's ankles actually change the chemistry of our blood vessels? And what did Eleanor notice in her own life when she started making these tiny adjustments to her daily routine?
The secret lies in the fact that our circulatory system is a closed loop, Jane. When Eleanor practiced deep breathing, she was lowering her cortisol levels and stimulating her parasympathetic nervous system, which naturally causes blood vessels to dilate. Within just a few weeks, she told me that the puffy feeling in her ankles had vanished, and she felt more steady on her feet. She regained the confidence to walk down to her local market because her legs didn't feel like they were made of stone anymore. This is the power of working with your body's natural mechanics rather than fighting against them. For many seniors, these small wins are what keep them going. It's not about running a marathon, it's about ensuring the river of your life keeps moving, even if it's just a gentle flow. Those tiny habits are the ultimate act of self-care because they prove that you are never too old to improve your internal environment.
Dr. Gupta, we have covered so much ground today, from the microscopic level of our arteries to the simple foods in our kitchen. But for someone listening who wants a clear, actionable golden rule to follow, what are the most essential supplements or nutrients that you believe are non-negotiable for anyone over 60 who wants to protect their heart and their brain? We've mentioned K2 and D3, but I've also heard you talk about things like L-arginine and CoQ10. Could you break these down for us in a way that feels manageable and explain why these specific helpers are the key to a long, vibrant life?
If I were to give a golden prescription for vascular vitality, Jane, it would definitely include the synergy of L-arginine and CoQ10 alongside the D3 and K2 we discussed. L-arginine is an amino acid that serves as the direct precursor to nitric oxide. It is the fuel that allows your blood vessels to stay open and flexible. As we age, our natural production of this fuel drops significantly, which is why we need to be more intentional about getting it. CoQ10, on the other hand, is like the spark plug for the mitochondria, the power plants in our heart and muscle cells. Without enough CoQ10, our engine just doesn't have the energy to pump blood efficiently to our extremities. When you combine these, you are essentially giving your body both the fuel and the spark it needs to maintain a youthful flow.
It's like we're talking about a high-performance engine that just needs the right grade of oil and the right spark plugs to keep running smoothly for decades. I think many people are overwhelmed by the number of bottles in the vitamin aisle, so having this clear list is so helpful. How do these supplements specifically help someone who might already be on medication for blood pressure or cholesterol? And is it ever too late to start giving the heart this kind of targeted support?
It is never, ever too late, Jane. I have seen people in their late 80s start a targeted regimen and see improvements in their energy levels and mental clarity within months. These nutrients aren't drugs in the traditional sense. They are the fundamental building blocks that your body is already crying out for. For someone on medication, these supplements often work in harmony to support the body's natural functions that the medication might be straining. For example, some common medications actually deplete your body's natural levels of CoQ10, so supplementing it is actually a way of restoring balance. I always tell my patients to think of these as cellular insurance. By providing L-arginine and CoQ10, you are ensuring that your heart has the energy to pump and your vessels have the signal to relax. It's a simple scientific approach to aging that moves us away from fear and back toward a sense of mastery over our own health.
Dr. Gupta, as we sit here at the end of our conversation, I find myself feeling a deep sense of relief and hope. We started by talking about the fear of losing independence, the cold hands, and the pain that so many seniors accept as their inevitable fate. But you've shown us that our bodies are not just machines that wear out. They are living systems that can respond to care even in our 70s, 80s, and 90s. Before we say goodbye, I want to ask you one final thing. What is the most important message you want to leave with the person sitting at home right now, perhaps feeling a bit tired or discouraged about the future of their health and their ability to live a life full of joy and movement?
My message is simple, Jane. Your age is not a cage and your body is not your enemy. I have spent my entire life studying the human form, and I am still in awe of its ability to heal when given the right environment. To the person listening who feels like their best days are behind them because of pain or fatigue, I want to say, don't give up on yourself. Those cold hands and those tired legs are just a message, not a final judgment. When we understand the science of our circulation and we nourish our vessels with things like vitamin K2, D3, and the right nutrients, we are reclaiming our right to be active, to be present, and to be independent. Aging should be a time of gathering wisdom and sharing love, not a time of shrinking away in discomfort. You have the power to thaw that frozen river and let your life flow freely again. It has been such a privilege to share these stories with you today, Jane, and I hope everyone listening feels empowered to take that first small step toward a warmer, more vibrant future. Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Gupta, thank you for your warmth, your wisdom, and for reminding us that we are still the captains of our own ships, no matter how many years have passed. Your words have been a true gift to our community today. And to all of our listeners at Healthy Kidneys After 60, thank you for spending this time with us. We hope this conversation has sparked a new sense of possibility in your heart and a new warmth in your step. If you found today's episode helpful, please remember to subscribe to our channel and share this with someone you love who might need to hear this message of hope. We have so many more deep dives into your health and well-being coming your way, and we don't want you to miss a single moment. Until next time, stay warm, stay curious, and remember that you are capable of so much more than you think. This is Jane Pauley, wishing you a beautiful and healthy day ahead. Goodbye for now.